Hello to all you listeners out there today. This is James Morgan, and today I'll be arguing that sexuality education should be standardized, regardless of the religious affiliation of the students or school in question. It is my opinion that many religious teachings of sexuality are in conflict with basic rights of children as laid out by the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, to which Australia is a signatory, and as such, curriculum must be standardized to uphold these rights. Sexuality education taught by religious institutions has often been shown as harmful to the mental well-being of children, partially due to their becoming victims of religious and cultural persecution and discrimination derived from millennia of scripturally inspired hatred. In addition, misinformation put forward by religions in the guise of sexuality education has destroyed the lives of vast quantities of individuals, especially, but not entirely, from third world countries through sexually transmitted diseases, unwanted pregnancies, and the objectification of women. Before we start, sexuality education should be defined so as to give our listeners an appreciation of the subject matter. Sexuality education is defined by the Victorian government in Catching On Early, one of their sexuality education guides, as more than just the biological factors and developments. Sexuality education refers to biological, social, and emotional aspects, such as respectful relationships, gender roles, and other social constructions. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child is an ideological document formed with the intent to provide basic rights to all children, regardless of any discriminating factors, in an effort to move humanity from a history of war, hatred, and destruction towards one of peace, freedom, and justice. In Article 2, it states that these rights must be ensured regardless of the religion of the child, and further along, that the child should be protected from discrimination or harm based on the beliefs of the parents, even identifying the need in some instances to separate the parents from the child if harm or abuse is occurring. Sadly, many religious sexuality education causes real harm to those brought up using specific interpretations of scripture as inspiration for education, and it happens far too often in our society. Parents advocate group FIRIS showcases books backed by the Christian Education Publications Catalogue, where homosexualities are directed to therapies designed to cure them of their apparent illnesses. Women are blamed for being raped due to the wearing of provocative clothing, and the suggestion is made that transgender people only exist as an embodiment of humanity's sins. Unfounded claims like this are hardly new, even in Australia, and while their power has fallen dramatically, they still hold much sway among certain demographics. These claims do nothing but harm the mental health of people identifying with these groups, as shown by Jones and Hillier in 2012, as it essentially tells these individuals that who and what they feel is wrong and in need of repair. If we were in the position where religions were exempt from adherence to the curriculum, we would surely see more of this scripturally inspired contempt. If we continue reading the convention, we see that the education system should be set up with the standards established by competent authorities. The key word here is competent. My view would be that competent authorities would be the ones using evidence-based practices rather than those based in scripture, due to the outcomes of both systems having shown themselves throughout human history. Evidence-based practices have led us to technology, drastic quality of life improvements, especially for the disabled and minority communities among us. We've even put people on the moon, and there's an immense pool of further positivity to draw from. Comparatively, if we leave these standards up to religiously inspired individuals, we need to look no further than theocracies such as Saudi Arabia, where both homosexuality and adultery are currently punishable by death in certain situations. Further in the convention, it states that the best interests of the child should be the primary consideration. Which of these two worlds would you say is in the best interests of your children to inhabit? The evidence-centric worlds of technology, progression, and tolerance, or religiously motivated societies such as Saudi Arabia, the Islamic State, or even some more theologically minded states such as Texas, consumed by the rampant discrimination and contempt for many people of difference. In the latter areas of the convention, it states that all students' education should include the freedom to seek and receive information from a diverse range of sources, with access to scientific and technical knowledge facilitated as best as possible. Youth Affairs Council of Western Australia CEO Craig Comrie claimed that almost all religious educational institutions in Western Australia taught absolutely no sexuality content in any form, and those that did taught only the biological aspect of sexuality without the holistic approach that is outlined in many curriculum documents today. Not only is this complete lack of societal responsibility directly in conflict with the UN conventions, but it is directly harmful to the health of the nation, as the freedom of religion to instigate sexuality education correlates heavily with high rates of disease, unwanted pregnancy, discrimination against both women and alternative sexualities, and a whole host of poor quality outcomes for our students, and as can be seen in areas such as certain states of the US, many religiously inspired countries, and even smaller isolated communities. Without our health literacy and information available to students, they are unable to make informed judgments about their sexuality, causing students to often make poor choices that affect not just themselves, but others, as shown by Ingham and Van Zessen in 1998. Some people may claim that abstinence is the only option because of the dangers that sexuality can produce, such as risk-taking, pregnancy, disease, etc. And while it is technically true that abstinence is the best policy to stop these risks from happening, it is utterly impractical, and a harm minimization policy has been shown to be much more effective. In a study on sexual behavior between 4 universities in the US, each with varied cultural differences, the religious population was more likely to have unprotected sex, be under the influence of alcohol or drugs at the time of their first sexual experiences, and feel greater levels of guilt, sexual dissatisfaction in their lives. Unsurprisingly, they were also much less likely to be formally educated compared to their secular peers. While it did lower the total instances of sexual behavior, the individual risks were much higher due to a lack of information, and the outcomes supported these risks. With lower levels of protection or contraception used, there would likely be higher incidence of both disease and unwanted pregnancy. Sadly, this is only one small study in an area that is understudied, so definitive information is lacking. Freedom is one important aspect to address when standardizing a curriculum, and is an incredibly valid point. How can we trust the government to be competent at all times? How can we free ourselves from their grip if they gave up their competency through corruption or other influences, such as religion? The answer doesn't rely on religious freedom, however, due to its irrationality and poor quality outcomes, but evidence-based academic materials that guide our education towards the best possible outcomes. It is always important to recognize that any standardized curriculum is made by people, and that while currently our Australian curriculum recognizes the importance of respectful relationships, recognition of sex or sexuality-based discrimination, and information pertaining to sexual health and well-being, it had not and is unlikely to do so indefinitely. Especially when we look at the approach many other countries take in this regard. Due to this, it is always important for sexuality educators to continually update their knowledge and remember to regard the curriculum with some level of critical analysis, for in the end, it is about teaching the child, not the curriculum. We owe it to our future generations to build an education system based around what evidence shows is the most effective way to educate our children, and any attempt to sabotage these practices through refusal to teach a specific piece of information or to misinform our children should not be tolerated, as historically we know that it does nothing but harm. We must hold all institutions accountable for the teaching of this core information regardless of the religious affiliation, so that future generations have the information and skills they need to make beneficial choices with a minimum of risk, as opposed to the unpredictability and multitudes of differing interpretations that may lead to negative outcomes. Why would we risk the safety of our future children, blindly trusting that humanity will interpret texts in positive ways and ignoring all historical information to the contrary? Let's make some smart choices.